Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Morgan. This is my channel Pisces Paperbacks, and today I want to do a dedicated review and discussion of From Bad to Cursed by Lana Harper. This is a contemporary fantasy romance that I read last month, and I just wanted a place to discuss more in depth the things that did and didn't work for me. So that's what I'm doing here. This is also going to be spoiler free. I wrote down notes that I'm going to go through, and I don't think that anything I wrote down is going to require a spoiler, but if it happens, just like while I'm talking, I'll let you know in advance. So a quick synopsis of this book is that it's the second book in the Witches of Thistle Grove series. The first one was Payback's a Witch that came out in 2021. This one follows Isadora Avramov and Rowan Thorne as they're investigating like a dark threat to the magical community of this town. During one of the magical competition, ritual, festival things that the magical families do in Thistle Grove, there is a very dark curse that attacks one of the participants who happens to be a Thorn witch. The elders decide that they want the heir of the Thorn family, Rowan, to investigate the possible origin of this curse and like who could be attacking witches. And then to prevent bias, the elders also decide that Isa should partner up with Rowan and they should investigate together. This is because the curse was very dark, and the Avramov family, which is one of the other founding families, their specialty is dark magic, necromancy, curses, spirit magic, stuff like that. Thorns are like life magic, plant magic, healing, animals, things like that. So there is also a natural rivalry between the two families. So to prevent bias in the investigation, they were like, Isa, you and Rowan are going to investigate together. Which, of course, drama, because people don't really know this, but they hate each other. Or at least Isa really, really hates Rowan. She has like a grudge against him from about 7 years ago, and she calls him her arch nemesis, and they really don't like each other. So that's kind of the setup to the book. It is a hate to love, mystery, magical romance. That's the vibe. Before we really get into it, I'll give you just my general review that I said in my wrap-up, and basically I gave this book 3 stars. I thought it was fine. It was on like the better side of completely neutral, but it wasn't a successful romance. Starting off with the things I liked. The setting. So Thistle Grove is so charming, so cute. You really get to know the heart of Thistle Grove and the magical community in the first book. And so in the second book, you kind of get a more well-rounded view of the community and their businesses and their restaurants and their just like fun parties rather than like very intense rituals. And it's just so nice to see all the soft, quiet, small magical touches that Lana Harper put in. I love casual magic. One of the things that I love in fantasy in general is our world with magic. So like not high fantasy, but like low fantasy, contemporary fantasy, which is why fantasy romances like this one are a really great place for me to like get that vibe. It's very cozy. I love it. Also, this is just a side note, but I do think that the increased visibility of fantasy romances and witchy romances specifically like this has coincided with the cozy fantasy and like Legends and Latte vibe explosion for that reason, because it's cozy and it's very light. Low stakes fantasy was romances, basically. Anyway, the other thing I liked about this book is the writing, which is fine. It's like good, solid, neutral fantasy writing. It wasn't distracting, it wasn't overly cheesy, it wasn't bad. It was good, it was fine. I also think the mystery plot was like fine. I figured it out by the end. It wasn't like a shocking surprise, but it was enough to carry me through the book when the romance itself was lackluster. And now, on to everything else. Starting with the characters, Isa is a fine main character. She is working with the family business in the haunted house that the Avramovs run. She's kind of been the head of that for 6 years, and she's not happy anymore. She wants to branch out on her own and start a sustainable fashion line, which she talks about a lot. But she feels a lot of pressure to stay with the family business. She's worried that her family and her mom, who's the head of the family, will be really disappointed in her and kind of let down, that she kind of wants to leave the family business and leave the family, even though they seem like a very loving and supportive family. So I don't know. She also, and I will say this is something I liked, Isa deals with anxiety and actually has an on-page panic attack. And I did like her journey with anxiety through this book and understanding that it doesn't have to be absolute 100% self-reliance. She can depend on the people around her who love her to support her in things like that and help her when she is panicking and having an anxiety attack. So I think that was actually handled really well. The real problem that I had with the main two characters, which are basically the only two characters of the book, no one else really matters, is Rowan is very flat. He is very perfect and mature and hot and kind and understanding, and he's a couple years older than Issa, and he's a vet, like a veterinarian, not a veteran. But he also is just like too perfect. He's just like a guy. And this is where I think it's not a successful romance. The job of a romance novel is to convince me two people are in love, right? But not just show me that they are in love and tell me they're in love. The writer has to explain indirectly, why are these people right for each other? What about them specifically complements each other? What about this situation is the perfect situation to bring them together and fall in love? You know what I mean? And this book doesn't do that. He's very nice, he's very cool, but I honestly think he could fall in love with anybody. Like, anybody could fall in love with him. He's a perfect, hot, magical dream guy. You know, he's just very generic. He doesn't have any flaws that complement Issa's flaws. He's exactly what she needs to be whenever she needs him to be something. He's very romantic when he makes romantic gestures, and they're very personal, specific romantic gestures, but they seem too smooth, overly orchestrated, because he doesn't seem to have anything special about him besides being hot and magic. And this kind of leads into the other issue with the romance, is that it's one point of view. This is a single POV book, only from Issa's perspective, and because of that, you don't really get to see what he sees in her either. That's kind of the whole point of a romance. And I've read single POV books or romances before that successfully convinced me that he is just in love with her as she is with him. Or the love interest is just in love with the main character as the main character is in love with the love interest. It's not always a straight romance. But this book doesn't do that. I don't know why Rowan likes Issa besides like what he tells her, but it's things that he could like about anybody. I mean, she's a very nice girl. I don't know. And there's nothing specific or personal about it, in my opinion. And this is kind of leading into my problems with the first book. So I actually liked the first book more than the second one, Payback's a Witch. But I don't think that was a successful romance either. And I think that's why a lot of people had problems with it. I was planning on making a video about this when I read that book, but that was like right before I stopped making videos for a year. So let me talk about it now. Payback's a Witch is a really, really good women's fiction. It's not a romance. Talia in the first book, the love interest, she's like a nothing. She has no personality. She's barely in any scenes. They have like 2 romantic scenes, and like the selling point of the first book is Emmy's personal journey, her journey of self-fulfillment, becoming more confident in who she is, coming back to Thistle Grove, reconnecting with her magical roots, etc. She and her character arc are the heart of that book. And I liked that book because Emmy is a very likable character. I really liked her. I liked her journey. I thought as a women's fiction, it was very successful with a romantic subplot. This book is not as good as that. I didn't even love that one that much, but the thing about From Bad to Cursed is that it is a romance. It has way more scenes with just Rowan and Issa than the first one did with Emmy and Talia. So this book is trying to be, the first one was trying to be a romance too, but this book is trying to be a romance, and in that way, it is very paint by numbers. It's very fill in the blank, like Mad Libs. You have slots where romantic things are supposed to happen, and so they just do. And it doesn't feel warm. It doesn't feel personal. And I do think that is a fault of the book. Without a main character that's as likable, without like the competition setup of the first book that was very interesting, this book loses the charm because it's not a successful women's fiction. Like, Issa does have a personal journey she's going through, and it's the thing with wanting to leave the family business, right? That is honestly a good starting point for her personal journey, her arc to go through. But she has, because it's leaning more into the romance and she has more scenes with Rowan, you really don't get scenes where she's talking to her mother or talking to her siblings. Like Talia is her older sister, and she doesn't really have that many scenes with her, and it comes out like why that is in the case in this book. But like, you'd think that if her personal journey is getting more confident in the ability to stand on her own 2 feet and not feel so beholden to the family togetherness, that's a fine place to start a romance, or to start a personal journey. But to make that a successful and satisfying arc for the entire book, you needed more times where she's talking to her family, talking to her mother. Her mother's in like 2 scenes. And you see the close bond she has with her family. So why is she so stressed about leaving? It also feels like she has these unfounded anxieties about leaving. And I know she actually deals with anxiety, and anxiety itself can be very irrational and unfounded. But without that as a compelling arc, the romance is not enough to carry the rest of it. It just loses a lot of the charm that the first book had, and the first book was charming, even though the romance was very lacking. That's really the main problem. There's one big problem, and it's that. That's my issue with this book. It wasn't a good romance. But I do have one last thing I want to talk about is this is a hate to love, right? That's the trope. Did they even hate each other? When you finally get the reveal of like what it is that caused this grudge between them, it's literally nothing, and it makes you not like Issa. So I think if we maybe got another POV, and if we saw that, did Rowan hate Issa as much as Issa hated him all these years? Maybe he secretly didn't hate her. We don't know. It's just kind of nothing. If he did hate her for what the thing was in the past, which he didn't really care about that much, it's just because he's prejudiced against Avramovs. And it's just like, the thing that made her hate him was stupid and makes the reader not like Issa. So what's the point here? Why do they hate each other? Why do they have to hate each other? They stop hating each other so quickly, and then by the time the reveal of that event happens, it's like, well, you don't care anymore, so why should we care? Not to mention the fact that it was nothing. And I've read books where there's hate to love based on very minor miscommunication before, and it's not always bad. Sometimes the payoff is worth it. In this case, it absolutely was not. Okay, I think that's everything. I went through all my notes. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. I am thinking I want to do these review videos like once a month, and try to do a little discussion once a month. I will hopefully get better at them. I really struggled doing this. I had to start over like a million times because I was just not saying things the way that I wanted to say them. Very frustrating. But I think I did okay. Let me know in the comments if you read this book. I'm very interested to know what you think of my feelings about it and if I made any sense at all. But I'm also interested to know what you thought about this book if you read it. And are you going to read the third one? I'm actually very intrigued by the third one. I think it looks really interesting, and I really liked the girl who's going to be the lead in that book. She had an appearance in this one. I'm very intrigued. So we'll see how that goes. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!